In the tranquil suburbs of Ontario, Canada, two lives began their journey amidst seemingly ordinary circumstances, eventually intertwining in a chilling saga that would captivate the world. Paul Kenneth Bernardo and Karla Homolka, whose names would become synonymous with heinous crimes and profound tragedy, each carried with them a complex tapestry of upbringing and experiences. Paul Kenneth Bernardo entered the world on August 27, 1964, in Scarborough, Ontario. He was the third and youngest child of Kenneth Walter Bernardo, who often sexually abused Paul's older sister, Deborah, in front of other family members, and would eventually be charged with crimes involving voyeurism and pedophilia, and Marilyn Elizabeth Bernardo, who often withdrew from her family due to depression and agoraphobia, eventually moving into the basement. Bernardo's childhood appeared unremarkable on the surface. Yet, beneath the facade of normalcy lay subtle hints of darkness. As he navigated his formative years, Bernardo exhibited troubling behavioral patterns, offering glimpses into the turbulent psyche that would later unleash unspeakable horrors. After a tumultuous confrontation between his parents in 1981, Bernardo, then 16 years old, received a devastating revelation from his mother. She disclosed that he was conceived from an extramarital affair and that Kenneth, the man he believed to be his father, was not his biological parent. Shocked and repulsed by this revelation, Bernardo's relationship with his mother soured rapidly, descending into a barrage of hurtful epithets exchanged between them. Subsequently, Bernardo's first romantic relationship soured as well. His girlfriend, weary of his controlling demeanor, ended their relationship and sought solace with one of his friends. Enraged by this betrayal, Bernardo retaliated by destroying all her belongings within his reach, setting them ablaze in an act of vengeful fury. Educationally, Bernardo attended Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate Institute before enrolling at the University of Toronto Scarborough, UTSC, in 1982. Coincidentally, another notorious Canadian criminal, Russell Williams, trailed 2 academic years behind him. By day, Bernardo worked for Amway, an experience that would profoundly influence his perception of salesmanship and personal interaction. Bernardo and his college friends practiced pickup techniques on young women they met in bars and were fairly successful. Bernardo took pleasure in publicly embarrassing his dates and participating in aggressive intercourse. As his relationships progressed, they became increasingly tumultuous and volatile, with Bernardo resorting to threats of violence, including murder, if his partners dared to expose the abuse. In 1986, Bernardo's actions led to 2 women filing restraining orders against him after he subjected them to obscene phone calls. Similarly, Karla Homolka, born on May 4, 1970, in Port Credit, Ontario, was a product of her own tumultuous upbringing. Raised in a household marked by dysfunction and abuse, Homolka's early years were marred by trauma and instability. Despite the challenges she faced, Homolka projected an outward semblance of normalcy, concealing the scars that would eventually shape her fate. It was amidst the backdrop of suburban Ontario that the paths of Bernardo and Homolka would converge. Fate, or perhaps something more sinister, brought them together in the early 1990s. Their initial encounters were innocuous, mere chance encounters in the ordinary course of life. Yet, beneath the surface, a dark chemistry simmered, drawing them inexorably towards a shared destiny. Their relationship blossomed against a backdrop of secrecy and shared deviance, fueled by a mutual fascination with control and dominance. As they delved deeper into each other's psyches, their bond grew stronger, cemented by a shared desire to explore the darkest recesses of human nature. In the shadows of suburban Ontario, Bernardo and Homolka's relationship took on a sinister hue, laying the groundwork for a series of unimaginable atrocities. Their union, born of twisted desires and unchecked depravity, would leave an indelible mark on the annals of criminal history, forever altering the lives of those unfortunate enough to cross their path. In the summer of 1990, Paul Bernardo's attention turned towards Tammy Homolka, the younger sister of his partner Karla. Sensing an opportunity to exert control and keep their actions within the confines of their own family, Karla devised a plan to assist Bernardo in drugging Tammy. According to Bernardo's testimony, in July of that year, he and Karla prepared a spaghetti dinner for Tammy, spiked with Valium stolen from Karla's workplace. Bernardo proceeded to sexually assault Tammy while she was under the influence of the drug. Later, Homolka pilfered the anesthetic halothane from the veterinary clinic where she was employed in St. Catharines. On December 23, 1990, following a Christmas celebration at the Homolka residence, Bernardo and Homolka administered the tranquilizer to Tammy. Subsequently, they sexually assaulted her while she remained unconscious. Tragically, Tammy choked on her own vomit and passed away. In the aftermath of her death, Bernardo and Homolka concealed evidence, laundered clothing, dressed Tammy, who bore a chemical burn on her face, and relocated her to her basement bedroom before contacting emergency services. Despite Bernardo's claim of attempting to resuscitate Tammy, her demise was ultimately deemed accidental, and she was pronounced dead at St. Catharines General Hospital. This disturbing incident marked a tragic turning point in the narrative of Bernardo and Karla Homolka's descent into darkness. On June 7, 1991, Homolka invited a 15-year-old girl she had befriended at a pet shop 2 years earlier, known as Jane Doe in the trials, to their home. Doe was then drugged by Homolka. Both Homolka and Bernardo sexually assaulted her and videotaped their assault. In August, Jane Doe was invited back to the couple's residence and was again drugged. Homolka called 911 for help after the girl vomited and stopped breathing while being raped. The ambulance was recalled after Homolka and Bernardo resuscitated her. Early in the morning on June 15, 1991, Bernardo detoured through Burlington, halfway between Toronto and St. Catharines, to steal license plates and found Leslie Mahaffey standing outside her home. The 14-year-old had missed her curfew after attending a friend's wake and was locked out of her house. Bernardo left his car and approached Mahaffey, saying that he wanted to break into a neighbor's house. Unfazed, she asked if he had any cigarettes. He claimed he had some in his vehicle. When Bernardo led her to his car, he blindfolded her, forced her into the car, drove her to Port Dalhousie and informed Homolka that they had a victim. Bernardo and Homolka videotaped themselves torturing and sexually abusing Mahaffey while they listened to Bob Marley and David Bowie. At one point Bernardo said, "You're doing a good job, Leslie, a damned good job," adding, "The next 2 hours are going to determine what I do to you. Right now, you're scoring perfect." On another segment of tape played at Bernardo's trial, the assault escalated. Mahaffey cried out in pain and begged Bernardo to stop. In the Crown description of the scene, he was sodomizing her while her hands were bound with twine. Mahaffey later told Bernardo that her blindfold seemed to be slipping, which signaled the possibility that she could identify her attackers if she was set free or lived. The following day, Bernardo claimed, Homolka fed her a lethal dose of halcyon. Homolka claimed that Bernardo strangled her. They put Mahaffey's body in their basement, and the day after the Homolka family had a Father's Day dinner at Bernardo's and Homolka's house. After the Homolkas and their remaining daughter Lori left, Bernardo and Homolka decided that the best way to dispose of the evidence would be to dismember Mahaffey and encase each part of her remains in concrete. Bernardo bought a dozen bags of cement at a hardware store the following day. He kept the receipts, which were damaging at his trial. Bernardo used his grandfather's circular saw to dismember Mahaffey. Bernardo and Homolka made a number of trips to dump the cement blocks in Lake Gibson, 18 kilometers south of Port Dalhousie. At least one of the blocks weighed 90 kilograms and was beyond their ability to sink. It lay near the shore, where it was found by Michael Doucette and his son Michael Jr. while on a fishing expedition on June 29, 1991. Mahaffey's orthodontic appliance was instrumental in identifying her. During the after-school hours of April 16, 1992, Bernardo and Homolka cruised through the quiet streets of St. Catharines in search of potential victims. Despite the typical rush of students heading home, the roads were eerily deserted. As they passed by Holy Cross Secondary School, nestled in the northern reaches of the city, their eyes fell upon 15-year-old Kristen French briskly making her way towards her nearby home. Seizing the opportunity, they pulled into the parking lot of Grace Lutheran Church nearby. Homolka, holding a map, stepped out of the vehicle, feigning the need for directions. When French approached to assist, Bernardo attacked from behind, wielding a knife and coercing her into the front seat of their car. From the rear, Homolka subdued French by pulling her hair. French followed the same routine every day, typically arriving home within 15 minutes to tend to her dog. Concerned by her absence, her parents grew increasingly alarmed, suspecting foul play and promptly alerting the police. Within a day, the Niagara Regional Police Service, NRP, mobilized a search team, combing French's usual route. Several witnesses reported seeing the abduction unfold from different vantage points, providing crucial details to aid the investigation. The discovery of French's shoe in the parking lot where she was taken underscored the gravity of the situation. Over the Easter weekend, Bernardo and Homolka subjected French to unspeakable horrors, documented on videotape, including torture, rape, and sodomy. French was coerced into consuming excessive amounts of alcohol and submitting to Bernardo's demands. During his trial, Crown Prosecutor Ray Houlihan asserted that Bernardo's intention was always murder, as French was never blindfolded and could potentially identify her captors. The following day, Bernardo and Homolka brutally murdered French before casually attending Easter dinner with Homolka's family. Homolka later testified that Bernardo strangled French for 7 agonizing minutes while she looked on. Bernardo claimed that Homolka beat French with a rubber mallet after an attempted escape, ultimately strangling her with a noose secured to a hope chest. Homolka then nonchalantly attended to her appearance. French's naked body was discovered on April 30, 1992, in a ditch in Burlington, approximately 45 minutes from St. Catharines and near the cemetery where Mahaffey was laid to rest. Her body had been washed, and her hair severed. While it was initially believed that French's hair was taken as a trophy, Homolka testified that it was cut to hinder identification. Beyond the confirmed murders attributed to Bernardo and Homolka, doubts persist regarding over 10 other potential victims or targets. Homolka and Bernardo faced multiple police interrogations regarding the Scarborough rapist investigation, Tammy Homolka's death, and Bernardo's stalking of other women before French's abduction. On May 12, 1992, Bernardo was briefly interviewed by an NRP sergeant and constable, who deemed him an unlikely suspect despite his admission of being previously questioned about the Scarborough rapist. 3 days later, the Green Ribbon Task Force was established to probe the murders of Mahaffey and French. Meanwhile, Bernardo and Homolka sought to legally change their names to Teal, inspired by a serial killer in the film Criminal Law. By the end of May, John Modell, an acquaintance, reported Bernardo as a potential suspect in the murders. In December 1992, the Center of Forensic Sciences began DNA testing on samples provided by Bernardo 2 years prior. On December 27, Bernardo brutally assaulted Homolka with a flashlight, prompting her to fabricate an automobile accident upon returning to work on January 4, 1993. Her skeptical coworkers alerted her parents, who rescued her the next day, leading to charges against Bernardo. He was arrested but released on his own recognizance. Concerned about Bernardo's suicide note, a friend intervened, and Homolka relocated to relatives' residence in Brampton. 26 months following Bernardo's DNA submission, Toronto police received confirmation that it matched that of the Scarborough rapist. They immediately initiated 24-hour surveillance on him. On February 9, 1993, investigators interviewed Homolka, where she detailed Bernardo's abusive behavior. Later that night, Homolka confessed to her aunt and uncle about their involvement in the rapes and murders, implicating Bernardo. Subsequently, the NRP reopened Tammy Homolka's death investigation. 2 days later, Homolka met with lawyer George Walker to seek legal immunity from Crown Prosecutor Houlihan in exchange for cooperation. The couple's name change to Teal was approved on February 13, 1993. Walker discussed the case with Crown Criminal Law Office Director Murray Siegel the following day, but full immunity was ruled out due to Homolka's involvement in the crimes. On February 17, detectives arrested Bernardo on several charges and obtained a limited search warrant due to the weak link to the murders. The search lasted 71 days, during which the only tape found depicted Homolka performing oral sex on Jane Doe. Bernardo revealed the location of the rape videos to his lawyer, Ken Murray, who later surrendered them to the police. Homolka accepted a plea bargain on May 5, 1993, agreeing to a 12-year prison term. On May 14, her plea bargain was finalized, and she began cooperating with police investigators, disclosing Bernardo's claim of raping as many as 30 women. Bernardo faced trial for the murders of French and Mahaffey in 1995, featuring detailed testimony from Homolka and videotaped evidence of the rapes. He claimed the deaths were accidental, later accusing Homolka of being the actual killer. On September 1, 1995, Bernardo was convicted of various offenses, including 2 first-degree murders and 2 aggravated sexual assaults, receiving a life sentence without parole for at least 25 years. Designated a dangerous offender, it's unlikely he'll ever be released. Homolka's plea bargain drew criticism as Bernardo's initial defense lawyer, Ken Murray, withheld crucial videotapes revealing her involvement for 17 months. This led to Murray's later acquittal of obstruction of justice but faced a disciplinary hearing. Despite being kept in segregation at Kingston Penitentiary for safety, Bernardo faced attacks, including an assault by another inmate in 1996. In 2006, Bernardo admitted to sexually assaulting at least 10 other women in previously unattributed attacks. Although eligible for parole in 2018, Bernardo was denied both day and full parole in October of that year. His next parole hearing in June 2021 ended with a swift rejection. In May 2023, he was transferred to La Macasa Institution in Quebec after a decade at Millhaven Institution, sparking controversy. Bernardo's next parole hearing, scheduled for February 2024, was denied. Karla Homolka's arrest, sentence, and subsequent release garnered significant public attention and controversy. Initially questioned by police multiple times in connection with various crimes, Homolka's involvement in the murders of Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French, along with her ex-husband Paul Bernardo, led to intense scrutiny. Homolka's plea bargain, criticized for its leniency, resulted in her conviction for manslaughter and a 12-year prison sentence. However, revelations of her active participation in the crimes, including videotaped evidence, raised questions about the plea deal's adequacy. Upon her release on July 4, 2005, Homolka faced strict conditions under Section 810.2 of the Criminal Code, including mandatory disclosure of personal information and restrictions on contact with certain individuals. Despite reassurances about public safety measures, concerns lingered about Homolka's integration into society, given her high profile and controversial past. It is widely argued that Karla Homolka's active participation in the kidnapping, rape, torture, and murder of the victims makes her just as culpable as her husband, Paul Bernardo. As such, many believe that releasing her from prison, even after serving her sentence, is unjust and unfair. Given the heinous nature of her crimes and the suffering inflicted upon the victims and their families, there is a strong sentiment that Homolka deserves to face the full extent of punishment for her actions. What are your thoughts on Karla Homolka's release from prison? Do you believe it was fair for her to be released, or do you think she should receive punishment equal to her husband, Paul Bernardo, for her active involvement in their crimes? Let us know your opinions on whether justice has been served in this case.